Good morning and welcome. Thank you for joining us in the Biotechnology, Medical Technology, and Life Science session of the Innovation Asset Showcase. My name is Kathy Durden, and I'm Executive Director of the Central New York Biotech Accelerator at Upstate Medical University in Syracuse, New York. We incubate biotech commercializing companies. We match them to our core research facilities, clinical and basic science experts, graduate student interns, and they work within our state-of-the-art wet lab space. And we do also a lot of educational programs regarding commercialization of innovative products. I'll be your moderator for the next hour, and our panel includes Dr. Norma Nowak, who is Director of the Center of Excellence in Bioinformatics and Life Sciences, Wayne Bacon, who is CEO and founder of Garwood Medical Devices, Matthew DeLisa, who is Director of Cornell Institute of Biotechnology, and Brian Margulies, who is Chief Scientific Officer and co-founder of Therapeutics. This session is part of the NYSTAR Innovation Asset Showcase, focusing on a number of different high-tech industry clusters and highlighting key capabilities and innovations in New York State, with a focus on how companies can leverage the robust R&D ecosystem supported by Empire State Development's Division of Science, Technology, and Innovation, also known as NYSTAR. We'll hear from two of the NYSTAR-funded R&D assets, the Center of Excellence in Bioinformatics and Life Sciences at University of Buffalo, as well as the Center for Life Science Enterprise at Cornell University. And you'll also hear from two companies, Garwood Medical Devices and Therapeutics, that can provide insight into successful commercialization of new medical technologies. You are welcome to use the Q&A to post questions. We won't be accessing questions until towards the end of the panel. Our first question is to Norma. Norma, please give us a couple of examples of how the UB Center of Excellence in Bioinformatics and Life Sciences has impacted the region's economy, and please also provide an introduction to yourself.
Thanks, Kathy. So I am Dr. Norma Nowak. I'm a professor in the School of Medicine at the University of Buffalo, as well as the Executive Director of the New York State Center of Excellence in Bioinformatics and Life Sciences. And I also am involved in our Center for Advanced Technology as the co-director along with Jeff Dunbar. So I'm going to give you a little bit of history on the Center of Excellence and then show you some of its impact. And that should lead well into the other panelist discussions. So the UB Center of Excellence in Bioinformatics and Life Sciences is one of the original four designated in 2001, with the state having had the vision to invest in the future of Buffalo. The designation brought capital dollars, enabling the university to construct its first building on the Buffalo Niagara Medical Campus, which at the time only had 4,000 employees and a handful of companies. The university worked with its partners and leaders in the business community in collaboration with regional and state governments to make the campus what it is today. 120 acres containing state-of-the-art clinical, research, and medical office space, including UB's Clinical and Translational Research Center and the relatively new UB Jacobs School of Medicine and Biomedical Sciences and the new Oshai Children's Hospital. It is home to 150 companies, including 120 startups, with 16,000 people who work, study, or volunteer on the campus. At the beginning, the state funded the Center of Excellence, and in my opinion, that funding catalyzed the university's commitment and investment in the growth and transformation of the downtown medical campus. Over the past 3 years alone, the Center of Excellence has supported the growth of 55 life science companies, generating 458 new jobs and $163 million in non-job impacts. It is home to 16 of these companies, including one Fortune 500 company. Let me share with you some examples of companies focused on developing innovative technologies to address major healthcare challenges, as well as growing our regional life sciences economy. The first is Athenex, founded in 2003 by UB faculty member Dr. David Hangauer. Athenex was the first anchor tenant in the Center of Excellence, leveraging the center's industrial scale chemistry facilities for its oncology drug development. It also utilized the cleanroom facility for drug packaging for its early clinical trials, as well as our corporate office space. It took advantage of our UV Center for Advanced Technology program for funding of 9 of its R&D projects. Today, it is a global biopharmaceutical company with a mission dedicated to the discovery, development, and commercialization of treatments for cancer. Despite having moved to its current corporate headquarters 2 blocks away, Athenex still maintains its presence in the Center of Excellence. In July of 2017, Athenex underwent an IPO and now employs 581 employees worldwide, with 172 in Western New York, including 30 UB grads. The company reached a market capitalization that exceeded $1 billion and raised an additional $100 million in 2019 from 3 of the top large healthcare investment entities. This is what success looks like. Circuit Clinical has developed a platform technology, Trial Scout, that democratizes access to clinical trials for patients in a community setting, enabling them to participate in cutting-edge clinical research and bring new therapeutics from the lab to the bedside. The economic development programs and support provided through the Center of Excellence were essential in attracting Circuit Clinical to Buffalo, as the original intent was to found the company in Colorado. Over the past 3 years, the company raised over $6 million and now employs 26 full-time staff members. Their network provides access to over 1 million patients, and they have forged partnerships with leading CROs and pharmaceutical companies. They entered the prestigious 43 North Business Competition and emerged a winner in 2019. Zeptometrics develops reagents for molecular diagnostic testing with a focus on infectious disease. Their existing product lines include molecular controls that contain microbes altered to be non-infectious. With their corporate offices on Main Street, as well as their labs, they still have a co-location in the Center of Excellence and are leveraging the Center of Excellence resources to develop new quality control products for infectious disease diagnostics, including COVID-19. Their business is up 60% amidst the increasing demand for coronavirus specimens. Another Center of Excellence supported company, Rheonics, is collaborating with Zeptometrics. Rheonics will be using the inactivated COVID-19 virus controls for its molecular diagnostic test development. My last example is Garwood Medical, also co-located at the Center of Excellence. Their technology leverages electrical stimulation to eliminate biofilm infections that occur during joint replacements. Electroceuticals are now recognized as an up-and-coming form of therapeutics. Recently, Garwood was granted FDA Breakthrough Devices designation for their BioPrax device. The company raised $7.6 million through last year and has launched another round. And we'll hear more about Garwood Medical from Wayne Bacon. Buffalo is a city that had lost its manufacturing base and had seen its population greatly diminish. Over the past 17 to 18 years, it has been reinventing itself through building an innovation economy. Expats are returning home and our children are finding well-paid positions in our companies after college. Much like the 20-year startup community story told by Brad Feld about Boulder, Colorado, Buffalo now is a city on the rise, and it is so rewarding for the Center of Excellence to be part of that story.
Great, thank you. Matt, several of your inventions have been translated into successful commercial applications in the areas of therapeutics and vaccines. What's the key to accelerating commercialization in this field at Cornell?
Thanks, Kathy. And that's a fantastic question. Before I dive into it, let me just introduce myself. So I'm Matt DeLisa. I'm a professor of chemical and biomolecular engineering at Cornell University. And I recently stepped into the role of the director for Cornell's Institute of Biotechnology. And that institute is home to all of the life science activities at Cornell. It serves as an umbrella. And under that umbrella, we have a number of activities that I think are very relevant to our panel today. One of those being our NISTAR funded CAT program in life science enterprise, as well as a relationship between our institute and the McGovern Center for Life Science Innovation, which serves as a home, an incubator for starting new companies, which gets back to your original question about some of the key issues with respect to accelerating new companies. I'll start my answer by saying I think while there can be many different factors that influence the success of a new company and its ability to quickly achieve that success, I think there are really three key ingredients that time and again prove to be the most important. One is access to talent. The second is access to capital. And the third is access to mentorship. And I'm sure my colleagues on the panel today will hopefully make comments about these three factors and agree that these are crucially important for the life of any company for that matter, but especially for new companies that are just getting off the ground. I'll start with the mentorship part. Well, let me first talk about talent and capital. Obviously, it's a very competitive landscape for biotechnology and healthcare. And New York is fighting very hard to compete with other geographic areas that have had a head start on us, thinking of places like the Bay Area in California, the Boston, Cambridge area. But it's through CAT and COE efforts funded through NYSTAR that help us be very competitive in that landscape. Creating an ecosystem where small companies do have access to capital and where talent starts to accrue and individuals decide to remain in the state of New York rather than migrating to these other areas. So it's a major challenge for us. We think about it all the time as innovators and inventors, as directors of CATs and COEs. And we have our work cut out for us. But I think through efforts that we've seen here in the state, I've been at Cornell for 18 years and I've seen incredible transformation in terms of efforts and resources designed to make the state extremely competitive in this particular landscape. At Cornell, the CAT specifically plays a very key role in providing access to these three important factors: the talent, the capital, and the mentorship. For example, New York State companies can collaborate with Cornell faculty, and those collaborations can provide resources to help get a new company or a new idea for a new company off the ground. The companies provide matching funds to these projects and have proven to be very instrumental in the early life of many companies, including a couple that I've been associated with. Companies also in New York State can utilize our Biotechnology Resource Center that's also within our institute. So this provides access to technologies like genomics, proteomics, imaging, flow cytometry, bioinformatics, and the access to these core facilities is provided at a reduced rate to companies that are in New York State. Another way that our Cornell Institute of Biotechnology and CAT program is helping is by providing life science companies, especially those that are local, but certainly within the state, with consultation and incubation services that are largely run through our McGovern Center for Life Science Entrepreneurship, and serves, as I mentioned earlier, as an incubator for new companies. And that's where the mentorship component comes in that's so crucial. So not only is access to talent, capital, perhaps high quality lab space important, but the network of mentors that are needed to get a company off the ground and to be successful is really critical. And the McGovern Center provides a number of experts who serve many of the small companies in our area and throughout the state by providing that mentorship that is so crucial, using their wealth of experience to help companies navigate the really difficult and tricky paths that they face as they're getting off the ground.
Great, thank you. And Brian, if you could also give an introduction as well as answer, can you tell us about your primary product and how it fits into biotechnology industry trends?
Sure, thanks, Kathy. My name is Brian Margulies. I'm the Chief Scientific Officer and one of the two co-founders of Zetagen Therapeutics. We are a biotech company that has developed a bone graft material that incorporates a small molecule that stimulates stem cells to become bone cells, and a completely novel bioceramic material that allows us to deliver the small molecule. Our primary product is a product called ZetaFuse. It is as I said, a bone graft material. Bone graft materials are kind of like bread dough or silly putty. They can be pressed into a defect in the skeleton. We are looking at several indications that include spine fusion, trauma like fracture, and then also, because our small molecule has anti-tumorigenic effects, we're also looking at treating patients with bone cancer. In terms of industry trends, that is an interesting question because this part of orthopedics is changing quite rapidly at the moment. And there are two things that are driving that. One is the high cost of using proteins to stimulate stem cells. So in the past, people have used certain growth factors to stimulate new bone growth, particularly in patients with a challenge. And those growth factors are very hard to manufacture and they're very expensive. And they've also shown a whole slew of complications because they're growth factors. And so there's a real movement towards trying to incorporate small molecules that wouldn't have that same kind of broad effect that a growth factor might have. And so we are definitely at the beginning of that trend of trying to move away from protein-based or growth factor-based biologics. And then the other trend is regulatory agencies are really moving against, or not, that they're starting to have some issues with bone graft materials that use either cadaveric human bone or animal bone materials as part of an implant. And so since we are a synthetic, we avoid those problems. And so, it's a trend that, right now people are moving away from cow-derived collagen to pig, because the European Union is pressing companies to do that. And then in the US, the FDA is now looking at no longer regulating collagen or naturally derived bone graft material as a device, which is what it's been doing for the last 30 years, but to instead regulate it as a biologic, which would make the regulatory pathway much more complicated and much more expensive.
Thank you. And just a real quick question, because I know that you both, Wayne and Brian, noted our emergency use designation through the FDA. What exactly does that mean?
Brian, do you want to take that? And then
I think Kathy's thinking we are the FDA has invited us to apply for a breakthrough designation.
Breakthrough.
Because we have a cancer application. And in orthopedics, bone cancers don't have a lot of great primary therapeutic options other than surgical removal and chemotherapy. So we have picked their interest, and so we are in the process of preparing a breakthrough designation application.
And I'll just add that we visited the FDA several years ago, and they had encouraged us to apply also for a breakthrough, which we have done. And then in October of last year, that was granted. And they also indicated that we're a good candidate for de novo, which lowers the class from 3 to 2, which is actually a big help.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. And Wayne, again, briefly introduce yourself. And can you, as a serial entrepreneur that has been involved in multiple biotechnology and medical companies, give us some advice that you have for companies that would benefit from leveraging the expertise at university research centers?
I would be happy to. And first, I'd like to thank NISTAR, and really the whole ESD system has been very helpful to us. So I'm Wayne Bacon. I'm CEO and co-founder of Garwood Medical Devices. We have a very close relationship with the University at Buffalo, and actually we license our primary technology for our BioPrax device, for which we've received breakthrough device designation, is co-owned by Syracuse University and the University of Buffalo. We find that with this technology, we're able to treat bacterial biofilm implant infections, which currently do not have a treatment. And kind of going along with what Brian's first product is, we also find that there's a slight osseointegration assist given by this treatment. So maybe combining the two, but maybe we can get a better result. We're co-located at the UB Gateway building in downtown Buffalo, and then right up the street at the Center of Excellence, and where we have a wet lab. We have our offices and prototype production facilities at Gateway. And I guess what I'd like to say is that as far as assisting, one of the first places to look, obviously, is to tech transfer. And we have a very close relationship with Jeff Dunbar, who's the director of tech transfer at UB, and also a great relationship.
Wayne, we lost you. Could you unmute, please? There we go.
Okay, sorry.
Tech transfer.
Yeah, thank you. Having gone to tech transfer, we've gotten multiple opportunities. So not just for BioPrax, but pH is important in the body and important to our technology. So we're now licensing a pH semiconductor, and on our third iteration of producing that in a foundry, and also an interesting and valuable infrared temperature sensor that we actually have spun those out into other companies so as not to lose our focus on BioPrax. We have found that through co-funded grants with CAT, CMI, we have been able to have targeted research done at the university, and we collaborate on a regular basis with the professors that are the inventors. I really very much like the fact that the university system in New York is very, I would say, generous to the professors. So the inventors in the state university system, correct me if I'm wrong, are entitled to 40% of whatever the university gets in the way of royalties and other payments for the technologies. So this is a huge benefit to the professors, but also I think encourages them to be to assist in mentorship and access to data that might otherwise they might rather not share, because it can be scary when somebody has proprietary knowledge. So we have found that being a good citizen, raising a lot of money. Yeah, as Norma said, we raised 7.4 million through our previous round, and in this round, our existing A and B investors, 95% of them went into the C round with 60% over what they might normally have considered buying. So they're well over their allocation. So we're over 60% through our round since August 5th. So we're very happy with how the university has been helpful to us, and also the fact that the community at large has been very supportive and are excited to participate both with Garwood and with the university system. I don't know if you have any other thoughts that you'd like me to respond to?
We've got some more questions. So to Matt and Norma, what do you do when a company gets to the point that they need to graduate from an incubator or accelerator facility? Do you have any formal process to keep them in the region and continue to support them?
So Matt, do you want to take that one?
Sure, I can take that one. It's actually a fantastic question and a really challenging one, and one that, if I'm being perfectly honest, I'll say that is a struggle for us. The investments, rightfully so, to this point at Cornell have been to create a life science incubator for those newly formed companies and to really help them in that very first critical phase of getting off the ground. And the mentorship they receive helps them right up to the point that you're talking about with respect to graduating and moving on. I would venture to guess that we're not alone in Central New York and in Ithaca specifically with where do these companies go when they leave? And it's a real challenge. We've been working very hard at Cornell to identify space on campus that might serve as the next step for these companies. And it might be on campus, it may be here in town, it may be somewhere centrally located that provides access to companies from other nearby locales, including your home in Syracuse, for example. But I think this is a real challenge that requires all of us to come together and think about how we do this, because we do run a real risk, and we see it more often than I think that they're more comfortable with, of companies getting a great start in the state, using state support and resources through entities like we've been talking about, CAT, COE, and other resources, but then often left with fewer options than they would like, with the outcome being one that we're all not so happy about, and that is companies leaving to go to other locations. So I will say it's a real challenge. We support and continue to support companies even after they leave the McGovern Center, and I mentioned some examples of how those companies can stay connected with our CAT program through funding opportunities, through discounted rates for core services like sequencing and proteomics, et cetera. But I think we all probably could admit that we could do more, and we need to figure out ways to do more to solve this really important problem.
Can I add something to that, to what Matt's saying?
Sure, I was just going to ask you and Brian if you had some perspective.
Sure. First of all, I'd like
senior.
to say that having the wet lab at the Center of Excellence is probably the most important thing that's happened to the company, as far as having access to assets that can be helpful and help us save money. So we are so much more effective cost-wise, but also so much more able to quickly respond to things. We have a large Australian company that's very interested in the company. And, whereas in America, there are certain bacteria that seem to attach to implants here. In Australia, MSSA is their biggest problem. So within about a week, we ran all kinds of treatment and prevention studies at the wet lab that would have probably taken weeks to schedule somewhere else at a multiple of the cost. So it's massively important to us. So I can't thank university enough for having the COA available and us having a piece of that. And also, as Matt said, we get to use a lot of the equipment that's there that will also saves us a lot of capital money. I'd also like to say, to Matt's point about talent, we hired Mary Canty, who is earned her PhD in biomedical engineering, and then did an 18-month postdoc in microbiology in the lab where BioPrax technology was invented, and her total focus almost total focus was on using this technology for the prevention of infection, which is the next step we're going to take. We also hired Jackson Hobble, who got his master's degree in biomedical engineering. He was an undergraduate intern. We liked him so much, we paid for his master's degree tuition, and he's now a valued employee. And the third UB person is Andrea Kraft, who's in a dual master's degree program, MBA and MHA at university and has been with us as an intern for a long time and will be full-time when she graduates in May. So between those assets, which would be very difficult to find, people that have experience in the field, in the lab where the technology was invented, it saves a lot of time and frankly a lot of money, because I don't know how we would have recreated that knowledge base.
So Kathy, one of the things that I think we found in Buffalo too is wet lab space is at a premium. So we, luckily when the medical school left the South Campus and went down to its new location in downtown Buffalo, significant space will be opening up as we move those faculty out back to the medical school. But we've always been packed where, people come, companies come, they're like, do you have any space? So through moving the faculty members back into the medical school, we'll have some additional space opening up for our companies that are going to be coming and joining us. I think that sometimes, people think that, well, so much can be done now, through data, you don't really need wet lab space. And I think it's been short-sighted that there aren't more facilities built outside of like the Center of Excellence, which allows companies to co-locate with us. I mean, yes, they get the benefit of all the core facilities similar to Matt. We have same thing, genomics, bioinformatics for clean room. We also have the Center for Computational Research, which is a real asset for many of our companies, which are more data-driven. But it's been, I think for us, a challenge to say, okay, this is where you're at. It's time for you to leave, the apartment and go and find your own home out there. So I think for all of us, as we are successful, the challenges that are going to come with that is, again, how do you graduate the children out of the home, right? And that's going to require, again, just some thoughtful people in the community to figure out how do we build this economy? How do we now make sure the companies stay here and don't leave?
I'd like to add one last comment to what Norman just said, and that is, I think there's a real opportunity. So this challenge also can be turned into a real opportunity. That if we do it right, it's not just about, as much as I think it's important to retain our baby companies and help them stay and grow in the state. But there's also an opportunity to turn this into a much larger enterprise where we're not just keeping our own homegrown companies, but we're also enticing companies from other states to come and relocate to New York. That's something that often gets overlooked in these conversations because we're constantly dealing with the efflux of, or the fear of efflux of companies away. But if this is really done right and at the right scale, there's a real opportunity to change the conversation to one about how do we also recruit and attract not just talent and individuals, but companies that want to come to New York and have an impact. And these wet lab spaces or the physical infrastructure for these kinds of activities not only provide a home for these companies to graduate to or to relocate to, but also if the scale is right, it creates an opportunity to solve another really interesting challenge that we've been thinking a lot about here at Cornell, and that is, how do you provide opportunities for academic industrial collaboration that can be done in a way that is in line with the nonprofit status of universities? So could you have, for example, a space where academics and individuals from large companies, some of the large biotech, biopharma companies come to mind, Bristol Myers Squibb, Genentech, Pfizer, Merck, where they could send teams of their scientists to work alongside Cornell researchers or other university researchers in the state and have an environment where that kind of activity can happen side by side.
I just wanted to add one more thing that hasn't come up yet, and that is Startup New York. So we're a Startup New York company, and I have to tell you that the benefits of that are a significant encouragement for outside investors to gamble their money with you. So the fact that we have some sales tax and our employees don't have to pay income tax on their New York State income to New York State, and the fact that the income from the company for a 10-year period is tax-free to the investors. So that's a huge benefit. And one last thought: if you get into Startup New York, you don't have to accept it immediately. Apply for it, get it, and then the day before you hire your first employee, say, okay, I'm in. That way you delay that 10-year period to when you really need it.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
I know that our we partner and are partnering about the graduate problem with our Center State CEO group that has a prospectus that includes properties. Some properties are in opportunity zones, and we really could be taking a more proactive and planned strategic approach to Startup New York and opportunity zones for graduate space. I absolutely agree. So we do have some questions that have come in. Are there any final comments by the panelists before we get to some attendee questions?
I'll just kind of following on what everyone else was saying. You know, as a young company, one of the problems we would face is that from a manufacturing standpoint, it would be hard for us to stay in New York State once we leave the accelerator, because there are a lot of facilities and requirements we have that would become hard to maintain. If we're building a space out in Syracuse, for instance, that would be a very expensive proposition. And on top of that, having to maintain a supply chain that is spread out along the Northeast, it would at that point probably make more sense for us to just move closer to our supply chain. You know, that the alternative would be, and I think this is where, you know, a rate limiting step to seeing growth in more biotech would be having you know, vendors and facilities that can do things like, you know, mid-sized packaging development, you know, sterilization vendors. You know, those are things that are actually really critical if you're going to try and actually get something to market. And if I have to get something to market and also build out a facility to manage for Zetagen, you know, it's going to be harder to justify staying in New York State than it would be to say go to Massachusetts, where those things are local.
So we have work to do.
Yeah.
So to get to some of these may have been answered, Wayne, talk about the unique equipment asset that can keep businesses here because most companies cannot afford equipment.
When you being dependent on you know, a wet lab, it is a painful process, because if you don't have it, you know, I wish all the outside independent labs well, but they're expensive. And when you're a young company, you need to do things on a very reasonable basis. So it's very, very helpful.
And Norma, can you talk about new innovation hub incubator and the assets continuing to be invested in experts, computational, space, talent, etc.?
So Kathy, you're talking about the innovation hub that's going to be located at?
It's a question from an attendee.
Okay, could you repeat that?
Could you talk about the new innovation hub incubator and the assets continuing to be invested in experts, computational, space, talent, etc.?
Right, so it's a relatively new program called the Innovation Hub that's going to be located at the Center of Excellence. The Center of Excellence itself is undergoing a facelift at the moment, and we are the home to the Center for Computational Research. As I mentioned earlier, we have a whole set of core facilities that are located at the center, which constantly we hire new people, new experts that come in the area of genomics, in the area of bioinformatics. We have one of the top ranked proteomics mass spectroscopy core facilities within that center, and they also have their own data analytics and bioinformatics around mass spectroscopy. We have literally contained in one building all of the assets that you would need to really do precision medicine, personalized medicine. We've also built out a biobank, which is located in our Clinical and Translational Research Center. So the thought was that, again, if you can benefit companies by giving them an environment where they don't have to invest in the capital, as Wayne was saying, they don't have to invest in the experts because the experts are at the university and they're available to them for, again, helping advance the company's goals. You then can take a company which, without that infrastructure and without that environment, it would take them much longer to, again, developing and advance their products. So we're very excited about the Innovation Hub, which provides funds for young companies through its seed fund program. It provides entrepreneurs and residents to help, because one of the things that we find is people start companies, and you often have the scientist as the CEO. Having started a company many years ago, I know that's not a good idea for a lot of us, but again, providing that talent to actually take a company from that very early stage all the way through to, you know, an exit, or just, again, the path for commercialization for the products that it's trying to develop. I think having talented entrepreneurs and residents, serial entrepreneurs, is really important, and Wayne is a great example of that. So this isn't the first company he's done. He's been there, done that before, and the advice that he can give to people that are, again, behind him who haven't done this is invaluable. So we would love to be able to create, and we are doing this, like a pool of entrepreneurs and residents who are going to help guide these young companies. And my thoughts are that you heard where the medical campus was back in the early days when the Center of Excellence was actually created, to where we now have 120 startups on the campus. That is, life sciences, again, builds out, as well as other tech in the Center of Excellence, that we are going to need more and more of these experts who have not only understand the science, but really understand the business of the science to help the companies really realize their end. So to me, it's one thing to have, you know, I would say that having started a company many years ago, and it's still in existence and still doing well, that is always a challenge. Is, you know, you can be a great scientist, but you're not always a great business person. So to all of us, having that talent around us, and we have people at the Center of Excellence who are business development executives who also help these young companies along the way. But it's always, I think, best to have serial entrepreneurs to really take their hand, like Wayne, and take them down the path.
And also people that want to stay in Buffalo, you know, or Syracuse or wherever you are. You know, I sold a couple of companies in the 1 and 7, 1 and 11, and my wife and I are not from here, and we said, where are we going to go? And we said, well, why would we leave? You know, so we're here. We intend to stay here. We intend to keep the company here. One thing I need to shout out is the Jacobs School of Medicine. So we're going to be doing our swine studies at the Jacobs School. They were to have started, except for COVID, but they should start this in October. And the other thing that's interesting is there's a orthopedic surgeon by the name of Scott Nozzo, who's a UB grad, did a residency at Hospital for Special Surgery. He was in the service. He did a lot of implant surgeries. He is on the original papers that came out of Mark Ernsberger's lab for this technology. He's now back with University UB Orthopedics, and he is the guy that's going to be doing our orthopedic implants into swine. So, you know, that's a fourth incredible talent that came out of the university. Out of our 8, well, you know, he's not an employee, but you know, we have only 8 employees, but we love this Scott Nozzo for being willing to do this because, you know, I don't want to disparage any people that handle surgeries in the live animal facility, but I think somebody that's worked on humans for a long time is perfect, and who also helped with the original technology is perfectly suited to run these studies.
Great, thank you. And one of our attendees, Damon, and I'll answer this myself a little bit and then have everyone chime in. How can we foster cooperation between regions such as Upstate, Capital, Finger Lakes, rather than competing to give graduates a home, or is competition good? And I'm just going to give my own perspective. When we started the Biotech Accelerator, we never ever felt like we were going to compete. We want to collaborate across the state, across the nation, globally. The utmost importance is the startup company, having them be successful, getting to the resources that they need if they grow to an extent where we're not able to provide those resources. We want to find them a good home. We want to find them the equipment, the expertise, the talent. Hopefully that's in New York State. Any other perspectives from our panelists?
So Kathy, one of the things that I've found is we have a couple of companies that we've worked with from the other centers of excellence or the other CATs. And we've worked with groups from SUNY Poly, we've worked with groups from Cornell. And one of my favorite companies is Rheonics, which is a Cornell-based company, but they also have offices in Western New York. And I've known Richard Montagna for a number of years. He is, like for myself, just with my own company, been a fountain of knowledge. But being able to, again, help Richard with Rheonics here in Buffalo, doing that like Cornell, Buffalo crosstalk, I think has been very helpful for us. We can provide certain things for him that, he's not, he's located here. So he's working with one of our scientists in the Center of Excellence, and they've had great success in really taking and evolving the platform that Rheonics has. It's microfluidics for doing molecular diagnostics. So I would hope and pray that we could do more crossover between Cornell and UB. Plus, I love some of the companies that are at Cornell, and I want to come and visit you. So.
Great.
I think that touches on a really important point, and that is, figuring out ways. So as Norma said, there already are some organically grown connections that have happened. There are meetings like this and other meetings where individuals like on this panel and that are here probably attending and listening have a chance to come together and share ideas. But I think figuring out more effective ways of communication and sharing information between not only universities, but also centers of excellence and CATs and even the small companies is something we really need to strive for. Even just keeping track of all of the companies in New York State that are in a particular technological niche, whether it's biotech or computer science, right? Having that at your fingertips to know at any given time, you can just look up a company if you're looking or look for a particular capability and be able to just find that information immediately. I think that sort of information sharing and access to that kind of information is really going to be crucial for driving some of these. Because if we just rely on kind of bumping into each other and organically creating relationships like the Rheonics one that Norma said, I mean, they will be successful. We could do so much more, I think, if we had better ways of sharing information and also sharing intellectual property, right? I mean, I think that a lot of universities are home to massive amounts of intellectual property, and a significant portion of that is unused, right? And so finding ways to make each other aware of the intellectual property that we have available, not just for companies that might come out of Cornell, but maybe we're holding some intellectual property that's collecting dust on a shelf that could be useful to a company that Norma knows about or to Wayne's company, right? And so I think finding better ways to work collectively as a state is really critical. And so to the question, competition is always good, and we're always going to try and do our best to promote Cornell and Cornell startup companies and hope that they stay here in the Ithaca area. But in the end, it's I think to all of our benefit if we can at the very least keep them in the state and have networks that make that possible.
I would like to add, can I add just one comment? Sure. to Matt? So we saw a technology that we thought was interesting, and it's owned by Syracuse University. And because we already have a relationship with them, 2 weeks ago, we were on with their head of tech transfer, the inventor, and we got a strong words of support from UB. And we're now going to look at some other technologies that can be considered complementary to what we have. And, it kind of made the introduction easier because there's already a relationship there and they like our performance so far. So I think if we could broaden that out to include other, state assets, other state universities, it would be great.
And two, we as a collective group, we're better able to respond to what Brian noted as the needs that we can better address and respond. So the services and the vendors and the supply chain issues. Great, thank you. And there is another question that's come in. How are assets available to partners? How do we partner with the university to quickly able to support COVID-related research and development? How do we contact to tap into scientific expertise, core facilities, equipment, and entrepreneurial-minded mentors. So this is more of the university-based
Right.
assets.
Quick stab at that, and then turn it over to Norma for her thoughts. But I would say the very short answer is, who do you contact? You contact Norma and I, people who are sitting at the director positions at CATs and COEs, usually have their fingers on the pulse of what's happening with respect to university academic research in areas like COVID-19, but also other areas that we will return to prioritizing, hopefully, when we are through this pandemic. But certainly reaching out to me and the team that I work with, we can easily quickly identify potential partnerships with with faculty here on campus, make you aware of and connect you with resources that we can provide, for example, through our Biotech Resource Center, again, the genomics and the proteomics and the imaging and the flow cytometry capabilities that we can offer to companies, in particular in the state, at a discounted rate. So I would just say reach out, and hopefully an event like today starts to put some of the names of people who you can reach out to on your radar screen.
Sure, and NYSTAR has a website that lists all of us as CATs and COEs and state certified business incubators. So NYSTAR would also be a good source for contacts. Norma?
Right. So, honestly, contacting me is great, but we also have a very talented business development team. And I often work with that team. And at Buffalo, it's David Duplessis that I work with. We basically are kind of like a tag team, finding the right faculty member that can really help that company reach its goals. And I think Matt must be doing the same thing at Cornell. How do you, again, create these great relationships, have the dating start, and then take that date to, again, a point where the company's goals are being advanced? We find that many of our faculty members, perhaps 10 years ago, it was harder to get faculty to participate with companies, but I think they're realizing that when companies do sponsored research with a university faculty member, the faculty member benefits, not only through the CAT, but you can also have these relationships where, again, the company has this project, they want to get it done, they put the money forward, and the PI at the university benefits from it. So it helps our PIs, certainly during these days when funds are not as free flowing as they have been in the past. And I think we would love to see more of those partnerships develop with our young companies.
And I'll just echo Norma's comments that you could send me an email, although I have a great team, and I would be remiss if I didn't mention Tammy Magnus and James Van Ney, who would likely be part of that team in helping you identify the right connections at the university level. But certainly reaching out to the CATs, the COEs, checking things out on the NYSTAR page, those would be great places to start. And don't limit yourself geographically. Just because you're not in the Ithaca area or not in the Buffalo area or the Rochester area doesn't mean that you can't reach out to a CAT or a COE in those regions. We work with companies, as Norma does, and as Kathy does, all over the state, right? We're not carving out our own fiefdoms and working independently. We generally like to cross town and county boundaries when we develop these relationships.
And I can attest that Tammy Magnus, I love working with her, Matt. She's just terrific.
Tammy, if you're out there, I agree 100%, and couldn't agree more with what Norma just said.
And Suzanne asks, have you considered nonprofit contract packagers in New York State to help with your commercialization? We provide assembly, kitting, packaging, order fulfillment, and shipping services in Tandem Solutions. So there's a plug for you, Brian.
We are, over the last several years, did a fairly extensive search for companies in New York State. So I went to Syracuse University. I was a faculty at Upstate, SUNY Upstate, where I still hold an appointment. And I made a decision when we started the company that we were going to keep our company in Syracuse, or at least the primary parts of it. We do have other folks who are in other states. One of the challenges though, and that's why I brought up earlier, was finding other companies that were at least in the Northeast. Originally, we were trying to get just companies that were in New York State. We have done that with some of our vendors and some of our contract manufacturing partners. But there's a real limitation. So, we found a company called HAL Packaging that's out near Corning. We have a close relationship with Corning as well. And so, one of the challenges is that there is no real central database that, somebody is curating that says, if you need regulatory support, here's who you can go to. If you need to get, you'd think things that it would be fairly straightforward to get, like plastic models, that took a year to find the appropriate plastic model. And so these things do exist in New York State in some cases they don't. But there is no central repository of that information. And that was something we, discovered either by accident or through, my network of engineering folks. And so one thing that I think, not just private enterprise-based vendors and resources and manufacturing partners, there are universities outside of Cornell and SU and Buffalo who are usually the three in these discussions, but like RIT, U of R, Alfred, they have a lot of folks who do engineering-based manufacturing. And for instance, we hired a really great tech from RIT, and she was in their bioengineering program, and she's been fantastic. And what they also have, and I learned this through her, they have a packaging degree, a whole department that's based on packaging. So they do medical packaging, they do food packaging, and they've been a resource for us because they send their graduates off to different packaging companies in New York State. And so, but it was a lot of work to get to that and to understand like where those things live and what's lacking in not just New York State, but this part of the country. And like I said earlier, if we had to build out a lab, and just going to what Wayne was saying, we have a wet lab as well. If we had to build out a wet lab, that's very expensive, and there's a lot of building space in Syracuse, but I can't necessarily move a clean wet lab into any old building, and so that's an hugely expensive proposition to build out a wet lab, and that would be hard to justify. So I wish we had found this not-for-profit packager, but that's the thing. I spent the better part of 3 years looking for these kinds of resources before we even started the company, and they were very hard to come by. And we worked pretty closely with our tech transfer folks. I've worked with Kathy, and everyone's been from Fuse Hub. We are involved with Fuse Hub, and then the problem is everyone is as helpful as they can be. It's just nobody's figured out how to put together a fairly comprehensive database of what resources exist in New York State, at least from my perspective. Like I said, we talked to folks at UB at the accelerator there, so it wasn't necessarily for lack of interacting with the accelerators or NISTAR or Fuse Hub. It just, those things aren't easy to come by.
Okay, and we're getting, we have one more minute. Any final comment before we close?
So Kathy, one thing that I would love to mention is that both at Cornell and at UB, companies benefit from the talent in our students. And I think, we've used some of our NISTAR dollars to actually fund internships with the companies. And we find that about 50% of the students who go through those internships then have a job with that company. So I think that, they're the diamonds in the rough, and those students then go through, get an experience that then gives them that job as they leave college. And what parent doesn't want that, right? but these kids all bring great enthusiasm. And I think if there are ways to again, expand the dollars that we could use for internships, it would be great.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, I'll just piggyback
So-
on that very quickly to say that the one thing that's changed radically in the 18 years that I've been here at Cornell is the massive interest, student interest in all things entrepreneurial. And they want to start a company, they want to spend some time in a small company and see what it's all about. So any chance we have to provide internships. And so if you are a small company that would like to take advantage of some of the talented individuals at our universities, again, please reach out, because we have more students than we know what to do with respect to finding them opportunities. So if you have some opportunities, let us know. We will send you some of our best and brightest.
Great.
And their enthusiasm is unmatched. So
I agree. Well, thank you all very much. We're at noon. On behalf of the panel and myself, we hope that our attendees enjoyed today's session. It will be recorded and provided in a post-event email. Have a great day, and thank you again for joining us.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.